Welcome to the Geek Critique. My name is Josh Wallen, and this is the second in a series of videos that I'm doing covering the myriad of Power Rangers games. As these games sort of tend to build on their sequels, I suggest you go back and watch that first episode if you haven't seen it yet. Each has a gift. Each has a power. Adam has a frog. But together, they will face their greatest adventure. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie, the video game. Power Rangers the movie for Super Nintendo looks similar to its predecessor on the surface, but it's a much richer experience. The first and most important improvement, they wised up and included a 2-player option. How about that? If this was all it had, it would already be a far superior game, but we're just getting started. You still start out unmorphed, but now, each enemy you defeat drops a lightning bolt. Unmorphed, each team has a unique special move that will drain a bit of power, but you're a lot better off to just let the meter fill up, because when it's maxed out, you can hit X whenever you're ready for it to be Morphin time! This clears all enemies on screen, completely refills your health, and yes, once again, turns Kimberly and Aisha into China. Seriously, I know it was the 90s and palette swaps were all the rage, but why does everyone have to look like the Red Ranger? Well, everyone except for one guy.
Tommy, popular and marketable. You shall command the mighty Tiger Zord. Oh, that's right, bitches! Tommy gets a Zord to himself, and none of you do. Zordon's the greatest!
Morphing also takes away most of the unique attributes of each Ranger. They all control and fight the same, except that filling up the power meter again while Morphed lets you use your signature weapon. Although as soon as it gets maxed out, it starts draining again. Using your weapon's neat and all, but I wish it could be activated manually. I always find myself maxing out the meter when I don't really need it. Combat is better than the original Super NES game, but it's still kinda clunky. There's nothing in the way of combos, just a single attack button. The plot doesn't seem to follow the series or the movie whatsoever. In fact, there's really no story to speak of. Ivan Ooze shows up at the end, but besides that, it's just a bunch of generic 90s beat-em-up tropes. And really, that's the worst thing about this one. It's generic. There are no Megazord battles at all. And the music, catchy as it is, isn't the kind of thing you'd ever associate with Power Rangers. And then there's the putties, who shoot at the Rangers with realistic guns and rocket launchers. What? Even when I was a kid, it just didn't ring true. It really feels like they just grafted the Power Rangers into your standard Super NES action game. It can be surprisingly punishing, and it's definitely solid enough, but I know this one has its fans, but I don't know. I can never really get into it, even with multiplayer. Now let's see if the Game Boy version still sucks. This time, like the Super Nintendo game, you start out as an unmorphed Ranger, but this time they're in their Ninjetti costumes from the movie. Also like the Super Nintendo game, you build up power and morph when you're ready, setting off a sweet chiptune rendition of that kick-ass theme song. When you build power again, you can set off a special screen-clearing bomb move. Unfortunately, that is the only time you'll ever see the Rangers' weapons. As far as I can tell, the only differences between the 6 are aesthetic. Your attacks don't vary at all, and again, it completely fails to capture the style of the series. Remember that episode where Billy had to punch and kick his way through blocks of dirt to get out of a cave while he was being pursued by one of the dozers from Mega Man X? It at least comes across like a finished product, unlike the obvious bait of the first Game Boy game was. But when the best thing you can say about a game is that it feels like they completed it, it wasn't often in those days you could find a portable adaptation that was actually worth a damn. Unless, of course, you wanted a Power Rangers game for the Game Gear, because the Game Gear version of Power Rangers the movie the game is once again fantastic. Since this was released in '95, Tommy has traded in his green for white, and Jason, Trini, and Zach have gone off to a peace conference or something, but their replacements are identical from a gameplay standpoint. It's more the same, with each Ranger's moveset largely unchanged and a similar story progression, but more of the same is exactly what I was hoping for. The major difference here is that as you land attacks, you build up a power meter, and can unleash a unique special move when it's full. God, I love the way the screen flashes and pauses to accentuate the impact of these. After taking down a few monsters of the week, Ivan Ooze is revealed. The stage ends with him one-hit KOing your Ranger, then he goes off to decimate the command center. We fast forward through the majority of the movie's plot, until the Rangers get their powers back. With these new powers comes the Ninja Mega Falcon Zord, and you finish the game by taking down Ivan and his Ectomorphicons. This version also addresses my biggest complaint about the original Game Gear game: the music. Rather than using generic-sounding tracks, you'll now be treated to 8-bit renditions of Ron Wasserman's soundtrack from the actual series. This is Power Rangers. Despite the upgrades though, I think I actually slightly prefer the original Game Gear game. The first game was a bit longer for one, and it had 3 playable Zords to this game's 2. And honestly, the original Megazord was just a bit more fun to play as. Maybe I'm just disappointed that even though the White Ranger is in, his Tiger Zord isn't. Even if you're playing as him in a stage, you still end up with the Thunder Megazord in round 2. Considering it's so similar to its predecessor, it would have been amazing if they just left the Green Ranger and the Season 1 Zords as unlockables for Versus mode. Imagine the dream matches. Green Ranger versus White Ranger, or the Megazord versus the Thunder Zord. But the fact I'm wishing for all this is really just down to how much I enjoy these 2 titles. They're underrated gems for the Game Gear, and I'll never again doubt that a great 2D fighter could be done in 8-bit. The original Sega Genesis game took inspiration from Street Fighter, but the movie version hails from a different street. Let's see, you mash B to do a combo, you throw enemies, you hit A to do a power move that clears clusters and drains a little health. When I played Streets of Rage years later, the first thing I thought was, wow, this game is like Power Rangers the movie! It's a lot easier than Streets of Rage though. I was god-awful at video games when I was 7, this was pre-DKC2, but this was the first game I remember beating the day I got it. Despite how easy it is, this is by far the Rangers game that I've played the most, and it's all thanks to co-op. First things first, look at this! They actually gave every Ranger their own set of sprites and animations! How did they do it? The background graphics are nice, but they're a little bit flat at times. This city just looks like it's a toy model. So, you know, points for accuracy. The gameplay isn't a patch on Streets of Rage, but it's still pretty fun. Each Ranger seems to have slightly different attributes, and you can hold B to charge a special weapon attack. It can get a tad repetitive, but the game's short enough that it's not an issue, and it's broken up with a Zord fight every few stages. Same as the Game Gear version, Ooze shows up, wrecks you in one hit, we skip the entire Phaedos adventure via cutscene, get new powers, no, not those. Then we clear the city of Oozemen and take down the Ectomorphicons. But wait, we're only on stage 3 and the movie's almost over. I said this game was easy, but don't worry, it's not this short. The Rangers randomly decide to head back to the command center and... flashback. So now we see how Rocky, Adam, and Aisha became Rangers, complete with references to runaway baby carriages and a trip to the Forbidden Planet. I like the attention to detail, as the character select portraits even changed to the original 6. Well, we might as well play as Jason, this is the only chance we get. That's not Jason. It is a little odd that the Oozemen are actually easier to fight than the Putties, but jarring as the flashback is narratively, it was a creative way to lengthen the game. The music is tremendous, and same as the Game Gear, it's all taken straight from the show's soundtrack. If you're as big a fan of Ron Wasserman and the Genesis Z80 sound processor as I am, then 1, we can be friends, please come play this with me, and 2, you are in for a treat. I still say I slightly prefer the Game Gear version, and I'm still surprised by that. But the Genesis game is a great way to spend an hour, especially if you've got a friend to play with you. On the Sega CD, we got Power Rangers the movie, the full motion video. This one is... I'm joshing ya. There was no version for Sega CD. Wouldn't it have been awesome though? That's it for the movie games, and second verse sims the first, Sega does what Nintendo don't. Oh, the Super NES version's solid enough, but both the Genesis and Game Gear games are superior in gameplay and in verisimilitude to the show. But there was one more game of this era for the Super Nintendo, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the Fighting Edition. Given the track record this series has had at the big end so far, I'm not really expecting much. Okay! Now we're playing with power! This fighter does so much right. For one, it just takes full advantage of the hardware it's on. Enormous detailed sprites, colorful, varied backgrounds, and gorgeous screen effects that really make the action crunch. Best of all, it's not a rip-off of anything. I've never played another fighter like this. Those pulsing bars at the bottom of the screen are linked to your special moves. You can do a special at any time, but if you time it to when your bar is full, the attack will be more powerful and the bar will change color. Do this 3 times, and you'll enter a super-powered state for about 10 seconds. During this time, all your specials will be at their max, and you can pull off a super move that's nearly guaranteed to finish the match. There are 8 playable characters, and that doesn't seem like much nowadays, but it was plenty back then, especially when they're all so unique and well-designed. Lord Zed is surprisingly agile, Goldar can fly, and the Shogun Megazord, oh my god, what a beast. There's no story to speak of. They were serious when they called this the Fighting Edition. The closest you get is being able to pick the Thunder Zord or the Mega Tiger Zord and fight your way through everyone else. If you beat Lord Zed at the end, then the ooze is back! I would say that it kinda sucks that you can only take those two Zords through the scenario mode, but there's also a trial mode that serves more or less the same function, just in random order. And there you can play as anyone. Verisimilitude is in check for the most part. I especially love Serpentera in the background of Zed's stage. The music, aside from the theme song, is not taken from the show this time around, but it does capture the spirit of it and fits the action. Seriously, it's awesome to see the Super Nintendo not only get such a fantastic Power Rangers game, but one that could not have been done on Sega's hardware. Definitely worth checking out, and if you like it, I heard the same developer made a Gundam game on the same engine the next year. So that'll be it for the Power Rangers. Well, the mighty Morphin ones anyway, but there have been so many Power Rangers games in the years since. Maybe somewhere down the road, I'll travel through time, assemble the Zeo subcrystals, and cover the rest of the series, but next time, there's a certain gorilla I promised I would wrap up, and it's about time too. Until then, like the video, subscribe if you haven't, back me on Patreon so I get to keep doing these, and you keep geeking, I'll keep critiquing. Brave in! Turn your cage!
Fire!